What's up, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.14. A lot of people have been asking me, when is it coming out? When is it coming out? When is it coming out? Well, it is coming out right now. There was like a quick hot fix that they put in, so that's why we got delayed today. But let's get right into the comps so we know what to play, and we'll go into how to play them a little bit later. So in the S tier, Akshan, probably like one of the best champions right now. Akshan Reroll is really good. Even a 2-star Akshan is really good. And he could fit in a bunch of other builds. You could do carry of Phelios with Akshan. You could play Akshan with Shurimas. You could play him with 4 Deadeye. You could play him with 2 Deadeye. There's so many different things you could kind of do with him that it's just like very flexible, and like it's really just a champion that's really powerful, and also like any items work too. Ravenous Warwick going to be very situational because you need the Ravenous Hunter augment. But even with 2-star Warwick, people are top 4ing with it. So this comp is completely disgustingly good, even though it got nerfed a little bit. Sorcerers is going to be the next bread and butter. Sorcerers are going to be the default AP comp to go for right now. And then after that, we have Kalista Reroll, or like the Shadow Owl comp with Gwen and Kalista. Both are really powerful and they like work really well together. Jinx Reroll, underrated. I think Jinx Reroll is going to be popping up a lot more. Onto the next comps, we have Gunners. Gunners kind of goes hand in hand with Jinx. You go for one or the other, but I feel like Gunners with the Piltover start is extremely powerful. And because of that, like, yeah, Gunner's going to be one of the default AD comps right now. So if you're going AD, you could go for the Akshan builds, you could go for the Gunner builds, either or are going to work, and they're both very powerful. Noxus Reroll, they did get nerfed a bit, but they are still very solid because 3-star Darius and 3-star Katarina is still going to steamroll your entire team. It's just a matter of getting it. Double Trouble Taliyah, very powerful with the right augments. Challengers, they're decent right now. Void Kaisa. Void is really good, but it's really dependent on whether you get a +1 Void or not. This comp is like maybe B+ tier without any +1 Void. But if you do have a +1 Void, either from an augment, a Toma traits, whatever, then it's like easily S tier. So it's kind of like in between those two tiers, just based on like whether you get a specific start for it or not. Built different. We're going to leave in the A tier for now. It got like slight buffs. I don't think it's as strong as it was like a couple patches ago, but it's still pretty decent. Ionia, Yasuo, Strategist Azir, the comps of the past, they're taking the backseat right now. And then we have the Deadeye comp. This is going to be with the Phelios carry. This is more of a backup comp in case like Akshan Reroll does not work out. Tristana Reroll, still very solid if you get the right starts for it. Multicaster Reroll, pretty decent. Shurima, good if you can get Akshan and Azir really going. So it's kind of combining a lot of different things. However, since Akshan's really contested, it makes this comp like a little lower in the A tier right now. Kayle Reroll still solid for those types of people who like to play that. I found that it's like a very specific type of person that plays Kayle Reroll. In the B tier, Ekko, Karma, Riftwalker, Kassadin, Zed, Rogue, Garen, and Demacia all in the B tier. They're not like horrible, but you need to get like amazing starts with them. For example, for Zed Reroll, probably going to be one of the more popular B tier comps. You're probably going to want like a 2-star Zed, maybe at like 3-1 to even consider going for this, in my opinion. But if you do have that, you could still go into other comps. So you're never forced into a reroll just because you have a lot of copies of that champion. But onto the legend tier list, Poro, Ornn going to be the go-tos right now. A lot of people, I think Ornn might be the most popular, but I think Poro, yeah, a lot of the stage 3 and 4 augments for pretty much all the legends, I just don't really like them that much, so I feel like I re-roll them a bunch. Poro, you just get an extra reroll if you just play Poro, so I'm a really huge Poro fan. I really only take a legend if I really like their stage 2 augment, and obviously Ornn's is very good because all the Ornn items are all still performing really well, so that's something to kind of keep in mind as you're like looking through this list. But after that, like Poro, it's like you can, there are a lot of good stage 2 augments that are not legend augments, so that's why I really like Poro. But it depends on your playstyle a lot. A lot of people, they love Aurelion Sol. Everyone's like, why aren't you playing Aurelion Sol? Keep doing Aurelion Sol. This guy doesn't believe in the Dragon King. I've seen that comment before. But you have to really like that playstyle to kind of go for it. And that's not really my thing. I want to try it sometimes, but I don't want to do it every single game, you know? I've been using Master Yi a little bit. Vladimir's pretty solid. And then the rest, like, they're still good. It just really depends on what you kind of like. Let's be real, everyone. Legends don't really matter that much if you don't know how to play the game. So like learn how to play the game first, and then after that you can comment on all the legends that you want. And of course, if there's any legend that's like super turbo broken, I'll be letting you guys know. But right now, just pick whatever legend. It doesn't really matter that much. You just really need to know how to play the game. But let's get into the Akshan Reroll. So Akshan Reroll is going to be the S tier right now. You're running Freljord, Shurima, Bruiser, Deadeye, and Strategist. So Akshan's going to be the main item holder. He could hold all sorts of different items. There's a really powerful Akshan interaction with Runaan's Hurricane in a previous patch, but it's still very good even though it got nerfed. You could check the data. You could just trust me when I'm saying it right now. He's really good with Runaan still. But just any AD items, just drop it on your Akshan. You will not regret it. Main tank is going to be Sejuani, but you could use all sorts of different tanks. Sion can be good. You could put it on Nasus, Jarvan, whoever you get to 2-star first, but ideally it's going to be Sejuani. Lissandra could be your secondary item holder, and you could also go for Lissandra 3-star while you're rolling for your Akshan, because whenever you do 3-cost reroll, you never want to just be going for only one 3-cost 3-star. So if you do have a secondary option, it would be Lissandra, though I'd say she's not like that important. One thing to note is that you don't really need to itemize Azir. If you think about it, in this Akshan reroll comp where you only run 3 Shurima, Azir's technically just a trait bot because Shurima only affects 1 unit at 3 Shurima. So if you end up putting items on your Azir expecting him to do damage, it's not going to happen because you want the buff going on your Akshan. So you have to ask yourself, would you run a random Azir in all your comps right now? Like, let's say you're playing Ionia or something like that. Would you just play a random Azir and itemize him up? Probably not, so that's like the same logic here of why you don't really want to itemize your Azir when you're only playing for 3 Shurima. Let's say you do want to itemize both Azir and Akshan, then you'd want to go into 5 or 7 Shurima, which we'll get into a little bit later. Freljord's still really good. Freljord's probably like the best trait right now. Like, holy cow, whenever the Freljord thing pops, you just see the fight dynamic completely flip itself, and it's just so incredibly powerful. But you want to be following the 3-cost leveling pattern strategy with Akshan, so just like go to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta, click on leveling pattern here if you're confused on how to do it. But yeah, Akshan, just put AD items on him. It doesn't really matter what you do. Just slow roll for him at level 7 to 3-star and have a nice day. If you can't get him to 3-star, just stick with him at 2-star. Go for the Deadeye build instead, which we'll get into a little bit later. We have a full item list down here for Akshan, Lissandra, Nasus, and Jarvan, and Sejuani. And then some of the recommended augments. Shurima's Legacy, they haven't nerfed this yet. I don't know why. This was like one of the best performing augments of the last patch, and they just didn't nerf it. It's like, I guarantee you, if you look in the data, it's probably like 4.0, if not better. Obviously, the data doesn't exist, but I think it was at like a 3.74 on one of the previous patches, and they haven't changed it since then. So even though Shurima comps got nerfed, namely the Azir comp, the worst it could be is probably like a 4.0, right? Which is pretty much an auto take already. Long distance pals is good whenever you only care about 2 units. Like, yeah, all these other ones, just general combat augments or reroll augments like Cruel Pack, probably incredible for Akshan reroll. Golden Ticket, same thing. And yeah, like army building, things like that. Anything to help you get Akshan 3-star is going to be really nice. Just keep in mind, for econ augments, you probably only need 1 econ augment. You probably don't need 2 of them for this build. Next up, we have Ravenous Hunter Warwick. Only go for this if you have this little like Ravenous Hunter augment. That's the gold tier, because this build's pretty useless otherwise. You could do like 6 Challenger, 4 Juggernaut. It really doesn't matter. I had a game recently where I played him with double trouble, and then I just ran 2 Warwicks, 2 Sets, and 2 Kalistas. It was perfectly fine. I'll probably be releasing that game sometime later, so subscribe if you have not already for a little surprise in that video when it comes out, because it was a really funny game. But I've watched top players play this with only a 2-star Warwick because they didn't get him to 3-star. They still top 4 with it. So yeah, Warwick is just an incredible monster with this Ravenous Hunter augment. But yeah, you just slow roll for him at level 6 because he's a 2-cost unit, so you follow the 2-cost reroll pattern. And yeah, just get a QSS on him. QSS is probably the only mandatory item. Everything else is like pretty optional. You could run him with like all sorts of items. I believe we have all the recommended items down here, Quicksilver being the most important. And then the rest of the units, they matter, but they don't matter because Warwick's going to be doing the bulk of the work out here. Next build we have up is Jinx Reroll. So Jinx Reroll is just going to be a 4-gunner build, but you're just going to be playing Jinx and Vi as your 2 main characters. What's great about Jinx is that she could stabilize you really hard at stage 3. So even if you don't end up hitting her 3-star, you could always pivot out of it later on. Or if you just like never hit Jinx 3-star, you might be able to get like a 6 or something, which like isn't that bad considering you don't hit. Then the games you do hit, you could possibly be doing a lot better, and then you drop in Zeri secondary carry or even like a Senna for support in the super late game, and then you got yourself a team. So this is going to be following the 2-cost reroll pattern again, and other item holders are going to be like Samira or Tristana, just any 1-cost units. Ezreal, Lee Sin, Twist of Fate, all pretty solid for this. Ezreal might be good because you can get like a lot of items for your team, so you want like a lot of support items on your Jace. You want maybe like 1 or 2 Zeke's Heralds. So this comp definitely utilizes a lot of items a lot. A lot of people wonder like, oh, when should I take Ornn? When should I take Ezreal? When should I take the legends that give a lot of items? Well, you generally want to do those if you play comps that carry a lot of units. So like this comp, you can already see like Vi can hold tank items, Sejuani can hold tank items, Jinx can hold damage items, Zeri can hold damage items, Jace can hold support items, even Urgot can hold some items too. So you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units you could possibly itemize, not even including Senna. And like, screw it, even Ekko can hold some tank items, right? You have so many different itemization options that like, you want like just infinite items on your team. Those are going to be the games where like Ornn is really good, Ezreal's going to be really good. I forget who the other item people are, but like you'll definitely find some use for most of that stuff whenever you're playing these types of comps. Whereas if we look at maybe the Warwick build, you really only care about Warwick. Like, yeah, you could put items on Yasuo. Yeah, you could put items on Kai'Sa, but it's really just Warwick that matters. If we look at this Akshan Reroll build, it's like Azir doesn't matter. Lissandra kind of doesn't matter. Only Akshan and Sejuani really matter. And like you maybe like put your leftover items on like Sion and like maybe 1 item on Lissandra. Like you might only need a Morello on her. So it's definitely a lot different. So you'll get like a little bit of like diminishing returns on your items. But yeah, for Jinx Reroll, you could do a lot of different stuff because like, yeah, Zeri 2-star, it's pretty much the same Zeri build as she normally does, right? As soon as we look at the regular Gunner build section, it's going to be the same comp, except instead of having items on Jinx, we'll have items on Zeri. That's really going to be the only difference. But let's move into the next build, which is Sorcerers. Sorcerers are probably one of my go-to comps of this patch, just because like 6 Sorcerer is so powerful. You pretty much get like double the value when you go from 4 to 6 Sorcerer. And this comp's really nice because you have carry options at pretty much every unit level. So at 1 cost, Malzahar's a great item holder. He deals a ton of damage in the early game. At 3 costs, you got Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz is an absolute monster. Swain, one of the best 2-cost tanks. And then 4 costs, obviously Lux. Itemize her and she could carry you to top 4s very easily. But if you're looking to get some wins, if you do end up getting Ahri with the blue buff just absolutely demolishes a lot of teams. I really recommend playing this comp if you ever get a +1 Sorcerer, because getting +1 Sorcerer makes it a lot easier to fill out the 6 Sorcerer requirement. And you could add in extra units such as like Kassadin or a Shen to like really round out your team. Like Kassadin would give you Void plus Bastion. Shen is just a Shen, which gives you Bastion as well. And then Sona with the Sorcerer's emblem is actually pretty decent because she actually makes use of the AP like pretty decently. But since this is kind of like a 4-cost comp, you want to do a standard leveling pattern. So I just realized this is like the first standard leveling pattern comp that we've went over so far. But you pretty much just play TFT normally. You just follow the generic leveling guides and do what they call playing standard, which is pretty much just trying to field your strongest board, maybe stabilizing a little bit if you're super weak, and then roll down on 4-1 at level 7, or try to fast 8 if you have like a lot of econ. Maybe it's one of those econ portals, and then hopefully you finish off your Lux 2-star. Late game with Ahri. Pretty typical TFT comp. You just add in units of your synergy. You have carries at different levels, 3 costs, 4 costs, and 5 costs. And then you just swap the items over once you 2-star them in that order. Let's move on into the next build, which is Shadow Isles. So Shadow Isles is going to be the Kalista reroll comp with Gwen carry. All the Shadow Isle augments are incredibly powerful, so I really recommend playing those if you get the option for them. Like, you could probably just force the comp if you get any of the Shadow Isle augments. Gwen is just a solid unit overall. Kalista, always been good. And then you could just run like 4 Challenger to really buff up your Kalista, and she just becomes like a spear chucking machine or whatever you want to call it. This comp does look a little weird because you don't really have like one of those main tanks, but like stuff like Aurelia and Gwen are like deceptively tanky. And then in the super late game, getting Aatrox just like, it powers up the team so much, because Aatrox gives you both Slayer and Juggernaut, which just gives you the much needed tankiness and gives Gwen like the Slayer trait, so you don't have to run like a crappy Slayer unit. Another great thing about this comp is that 3-cost reroll shares a lot of the same leveling pattern as standard leveling. So let's say you play the game and you get a lot of Kalistas, then yeah, obviously reroll for Kalista 3-star. But let's say you don't get that and you're like struggling, you're hard stuck Kalista 1-star, and you're like, what do I do? Well, you could just play Gwen carry and then go for Aatrox instead in the super late game. So there are a lot of different things you could kind of do with this comp, and you're not completely pigeonholed into Kalista carry, even though it is like preferred. I believe that is outlined in the how to play section down here, but if you want to like read through all these guides in your free time, maybe when you're playing the game or something and you want to just check something and it's like kind of hard to navigate through a video, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta. for more information on that. But yeah, Kalista items like Gwynsu's, Giant Slayer, Gunblade, Hand of Justice, Guardbreaker. She really uses any damage item. Like, I've used all sorts of weird items on Kalista because she could use the attack speed items, she could use the AP items. I believe like the attack speed ones are a little bit better, but if you have the items, like you can't handpick your items every single game. So just slam items and use them, get more value out of them, and you'll be pretty much set for that. The core is pretty much just for Shadow Owl, for Challenger. Obviously, you want to add in Slayer once you get Gwen 2-star, but if Gwen's just 1-star, don't really worry about the Slayer too much. Now onto the A tier, we have Gunners. So again, Gunners, very similar to the Jinx Reroll build. This one is a slightly different version, but if you had a Piltover start, and Gunners are extremely good with Piltover start because the T-Hex just completely demolishes everyone, just copy the build that we had in the Jinx build. Because this is the same exact build for Zeri carry if you have Piltover start. But if you don't have Piltover start, because we're not always so fortunate, and let's say you did not cash out, it could look something like this. 4 Gunner, 2 Invoker, 2 Zon, 2 Freljord, 2 Bruiser. What's good about this is that you always get a solid tank in either Sejuani or Shen. Whoever you 2-star first, put items on them, though again, it's preferred to be Sejuani because Sion is like one of the best tanks in the game right now. So if you do end up getting to the late game, just adding in a random Sion, even when he's 1-star, still puts in a ton of work. I just realized I need to update these augments, so I'll probably do that next week. But standard leveling pattern for this team comp, and then you just drop items on Zeri. Good item holders in the early game is going to be Jhin, Tristana, Ashe, because you could kind of flex between the Deadeye and the Gunner build. Spatula holders, Urgot's pretty good, Ekko's pretty good, or legendaries. I know Urgot and Ekko aren't in this picture right now, but if you play the Piltover version, you will be playing those units. And then the way to play this comp is it's just playing AD. Gunner starts flexing between Deadeyes as well with Aphelios and Akshan. They share like a ton of items. Like you could build like Rageblade, it's good on both comps. You could build like Infinity Edge, Guardbreaker. Like there's every damage item, every AD item is going to work on both comps. Yeah, like some are better than others, but if you just build it early and then you just get the units for free because you're flexing between 2 comps, you get like a lot more power that way. But generally the late game build is just like 4 Gunner plus tanks, and whatever tanks you get, that's going to be what you play. So if you have the T-Hex from Piltover start, like yeah, T-Hex is going to be a monster, but if you don't, you have a lot of different options you saw up there. Next build we have up is Noxus Reroll. So Noxus Reroll, it's really just going to be Darius and Katarina. None of the other units matter that much, and just build AD items on Darius, AP items on Katarina, 1 healing item on each, or get healing from an augment, and they're just going to be demolishing all your enemies right now. So leveling pattern is going to be 3 cost reroll because again, they're the only units you really care about. And this comp is really dependent on getting Noxus stacks because the earlier you get them, the stronger your team is, which makes it easier to get even more Noxus stacks. So if you ever get like a strong Noxus opener, that's like the only time I would consider playing this comp. I wouldn't really just force it. Maybe in previous patches you could just force this build because it was just that good before, but it got nerfed a little bit. So you can only do it when you have like decent openers for it. So what is a decent opener? Maybe like getting an early Darius or Katarina and then getting some early game win. Like let's say you have like a 2-star Samira and early Darius and maybe like 1 random 2-star that doesn't really have any synergies with their team. Go ahead and play like 3 Noxus in the early game, level up a little more aggressively and try to get some stacks there. And then with those stacks, hopefully you're on a win streak. You could use that extra gold to like fuel the economy for your reroll. It's not always going to happen that way, but it's just kind of one thing to think about. Noxus also becomes really good whenever you have an emblem, like a Noxus emblem, because 1, you can build it from Spatula, and 2, any legendary unit that likes any sort of stats are going to be good with it. So you could just put Noxus emblem on any 2-star legendary in the late game and it's going to work out really well. Another thing that's really good is that both Juggernaut emblem and even Slayer emblem are both good on both Darius and Katarina. So you could use all sorts of different items that you could build from Spatula, which a lot of comps can't really say because a lot of emblems you can't build them. They're called non-craftable emblems or something like that. But pretty much all the ones that you could use in the Noxus comp, you could just build them. Next build up we have is Double Trouble Taliyah. So this is just going to revolve around like Taliyah and Set and Swain. Mainly just Taliyah and Set. Swain's not as important. Set's going to be the main tank of this comp and Taliyah's going to be the main carry. But it's just a 2-cost reroll comp. You only take this if you get Double Trouble. If you get True 2s or whatever it's called, what was that augment called? Maybe it's called like 2 Healthy or something like that. That's another reason to kind of go for this build. Mainly it's going to be the Double Trouble augment that really like is the hand-picked one. But if you see this on 2-1, you could just force this build if you have like good items for Taliyah. What are good items for Taliyah? Well, they're just all listed down here. But really simple comp to play, don't really need to like review it that much. So let's get on into the next build, which is Challengers. So Challengers, it's just going to be very similar to the Ionia comp. You just run 6 Challengers, and it's like a much cheaper option than the Ionia version, but it's a very solid build overall. You just go for Kaisa and Yasuo carry with Shen as a main tank. So you have like 3 item holders, which is really nice. So again, like stuff like Ezreal, stuff like Ornn going to be great for this build because you want like 9 items at the end of the game. Or it's really good in portals such as like Yorick's Graveyard or like Thresh's Sanctum because they give you a lot of extra loot. What's it called? Like Scuttle Puddle's another one. Or even any of the Prismatic Portal augments because, again, they just give you a ton more stuff to kind of use. But overall, it's like pretty solid comp. RFC Yasuo's decent if you want him to stun backline. You don't have to use it. Like you could do Edge of Night also for him to get extra casts off. Shen can use pretty much any tank item. And you also have a flex spot. You don't really have to run Heimerdinger. It could be literally anyone. So the main part of the build is just like 6 Challenger plus Shen to give you Ionia, and that's 7 units. So your 8th, 9th unit can be literally anything in the game. So whatever you get to 2-star, you could just throw them in. Let's move on into the next build, which is Void Kaisa. So Void, again, as we talked about before, if you ever get like +1 Void, it becomes like S tier. But if you don't have it, it's maybe like B+ tier or like A-. It's pretty much just a Kaisa comp. You just run Kaisa, and then you just have some frontline. You could run like Kaisa Bruisers as well if you don't get like the +1 Voids. But again, Bruisers is kind of the same thing. If you get +1 Bruiser, it's very powerful. But it's kind of good because then you could like have sort of 2 outs that you could kind of go for and then pair it up with like Rek'Sai carry, secondary carry if you do get that. So there are a couple of different versions of this build. But obviously like getting to 8 Void is so powerful. So that's like the main win condition or whatever you want to call it for this comp. Standard leveling for this, but again, really only consider playing this if you have the +1 Void augments, or if you get like free Void units and you just have everything 2-star, then like, yeah, you could get away with only having 6 Void in the late game and probably do okay. You probably won't win, but it'll be like just fine. Next up we have is Build Different. Build Different, you could run like all sorts of different carries. You don't have to run the carries listed here, but for the tanks like Jarvan, Sejuani, Shen, going to be your main bread and butter frontline because they're just so good. And then for damage dealers, you pretty much just go for whoever you have 2-starred. Keep in mind for carries, it's nice to run like multiple copies of the same carry. So whoever's like OP on a certain patch, you just play that unit. But you could also run like, let's say Kai'Sa's really good. You could run like 2 2-star Kai'Sas and potentially go for 3-star Kaisa, not even on purpose, and kind of get it just because Built Different like allows you to run multiple units. I'd probably only play this with Prismatic Built Different. The gold one's still playable. They did buff the gold one quite a bit, but I don't know if it's like that worth it to kind of try. Let me know if you guys like experiment with the gold one, but I know for the Prismatic one, you could definitely use it. Gold one, it's kind of like on the borderline. But let's move on into the next build, which is Yasuo Ionia. Very similar to the other Challenger build. You just go for 6 Ionia instead of 6 Challenger. And the same comp. It's like pretty much the same thing. Shen, main tank. Yasuo, main bruiser. Kaisa, main carry. Then you fill in your late game with like Ahri, Kalista, whatever, like if you have leftover items. But Ahri is very powerful, obviously, in the 6 Ionia build because she gets like a lot of bonus mana and she just completely obliterates teams. Also, if you ever get the Sentinel Spirit or whatever it's called, like the gold Sentinel augment, it's probably like one of the best augments ever in the early game and you could just hard force it from like any spot. And do like decently fine. Standard leveling pattern for this because you're going for all 4 cost units. You really only care about 3 units like Kaisa, Yasuo, and Shen, but you play it the same way as we did in the previous patch. Next build up, we have Strategist Azir Lux. Very similar to the Kaisa comp. You play it the same way you did in the previous patch as well. But this one, you just go like 4 Strategists, Azir carry, Lux secondary carry. Again, make sure to leave only 2 items on your Lux so that she gets like the Radiant item from Demacia. And then main tank could be like Nasus, Jarvan, whoever you get to 2-star. Keep in mind again, like Nasus really only has a Juggernaut trait to make him tanky. He doesn't really have the Shurima buff because when you run 3 Shurima, you can only 1 unit gets buffed and that's going to be Azir. So just keep that in mind whenever you like itemize your Nasus. Like maybe like split your tank items a little bit, maybe 1 on Jarvan, 1 on Nasus, and don't invest too much in them. You want to make sure your Lux and Azir are fully itemized because those are going to be the main carries of your comp. But standard leveling pattern because like 1, 2, 3, 4 cost units, that's a lot. And then strategists you could slowly replace in the late game for legendaries as you hit them because like, yeah, strategist is really good. 5 strategists is actually incredible, but are you really going to be running Swain or Teemo in the super late game when you could run like a 2-star Scion or something like that? Probably not, so that's one way to kind of cap out the comp. All the item recommendations down here, Guinsoo's Rageblade on Azir, probably the best one. I like pairing Guinsoo's with Static Shiv, but you could just do like full damage as well, like Giant Slayer, Hextech Gunblade, Deathcap, Jeweled Gauntlet, Archangel's Guardbreaker, all those are really nice. Lux, I think blue buff plus like Gunblade or something like that is pretty good. Shojin Gunblade, you could do full damage with like Jeweled Gauntlet, Archangels. I think blue buff is like much better now. We haven't updated the picture, but blue buff is really good because they nerfed Lux's starting mana. So blue buff just negates that nerf, and blue buff was already good before, so it just like makes it like even better now after the nerfs. But you don't have to have it, you know, it's just like a very solid option. Next one up we have is Deadeye. So Deadeye, this is going to be your backup Akshan build. You just go for Aphelios carry instead of Akshan. But you just go 4 Deadeye, 3 Freljord, and it's a very powerful comp because 3 Freljord, again, any comp that's running 3 Freljord, or that's allowed to, just completely like stops the enemy team like from doing anything because wow, it's just so powerful. I know we have like leftover items on Urgot in this build, but you should probably put them on Akshan. We just need to update the picture. But Aphelios is like pretty good because again, you just run Akshan, and then if you don't get your dream Akshan like reroll going, you could just like get Aphelios. Or like some games you just get Aphelios 2-star for free, and he's gonna be like popping a lot of people. Main tank gonna be Sejuani or Shen, whoever you 2-star first. And then Tarek's like a nice person to put in the middle to give a shield to everyone. Tarek did get buffed, but then nerfed right after, but Tarek's still very, very good. He was always good. I don't even know why they buffed him in the first place. But the way to play this build is just, again, with the AD flex comps, you go either the Gunner build, the Aphelios build, the Jinx build, and then now the Aphelios build. 4 different options that you have depending on what units you hit. And that just gives you a lot more outs, which, again, you won't get like perfect items when you're playing like flex or whatever, but you don't need perfect items to win games, let alone top 4. So if you have like certain trees that you can kind of go, people like call them like lines or whatever, like you could go towards like an AD tree and then like maybe go explore some of the lines there. Again, you won't get like perfect items or whatever if you like slam items very aggressively, because like let's say you build like perfect Aphelios items, but then you end up going a Zeri build. Yeah, you're not going to have perfect Zeri items, but who really cares because you got Zeri 2-star for free. But speaking of items, Aphelios items, I think like Rageblade, probably the best item on him. A lot of people think this is mandatory on him, though. I don't really think it is. It's obviously extremely good on Aphelios, but after that, like, just any AD item will do just fine on him. Next build up we have is Tristana Reroll. So if you ever get, like, maybe, let's say, like, 8 units at stage 2-1 of Maokai, Viego, Poppy, and Tristana, if you get 8 combined of those units, for sure go for this comp. At 7, 6, or 5, I don't know, that's kind of like a gray area for me. If you get like any of the reroll augments, then yeah, sure, go for one of these builds as well. But it's still very powerful, and I'm glad that this is like, I feel like this is like the perfect spot for a 1-cost reroll to be in, where only one person can go for it. But if they do, they're going to do like pretty decently if they hit, and if they don't hit, then it's going to do pretty badly. You don't need perfect items on Tristana. You could use all sorts of stuff on her. You don't need perfect items on Maokai. You could use all sorts of stuff on Maokai. I don't know. I feel like this is a very well done like 1-cost reroll comp in terms of like its power level and like the requirements to play it. So no complaints there. That's why it's like just in the A tier. Obviously you want a 3-star Maokai, Poppy, Viego, and Tristana if you can, but you only need 3 of them to 3-star in order to get Tristana really buffed up. So really focus mostly on Maokai and Tristana because Maokai is going to be your main tank. But your level 6 will look like Maokai, Viego, Tristana, a Gunner, it could be Jinx or Jace, and Poppy and Teemo or Kled to get the Yordle buff. And then late game, you could replace Teemo or Kled with Heimerdinger. But then after that, as you level up, you just add in Gunners. So you go for like 3 Gunner, then 4 Gunner. I know there's no 3 Gunner trait, but like you don't really have anything else to put in at that stage. So you're really just trying to rush to level 8 to put in the 4th Gunner. Very powerful comp though. But again, you need a lot of the units at the start to kind of go for this. Next build up we have is Multicaster Reroll. This is just like Vel'Koz, Sona Reroll. It got a little more powerful because a lot of people are going for Akshan and Kalista and a lot of those types of 3-cost builds. So ideally that means that a lot of the 3-cost units are taken out of the pool. A lot of people are playing Taric as well. So it should theoretically be easier to hit Vel'Koz 3, Sona 3. I'm not saying it's guaranteed or anything, but it's like slightly higher than it was in previous patches, so we bumped this up a little bit. Just do 3-cost reroll, itemize Sona and Vel'Koz, and main tank either Swain or Taric. Probably not going to be Taric, because Taric's going to be very hard to like 3-star, but 3-star Swain, very possible. And also Swain's probably a tankier unit than Taric. But moving on into the next build we have is the Shurima comp. We need to update this picture, but this comp is really good if you want to combine Azir and Akshan, because once you reach 5 Shurima, it actually buffs up all the units, whereas 3 Shurima, it only buffs up one of them. So if you want to do like a combination of different things, even like carrying Nasus as like a tertiary carry or whatever, or like as a bruiser, this is going to be a pretty good option for that. But really good with +1 Shurima so that you don't have to field like a Renekton, for example. But the regular Akshan build probably going to be a little bit better, and the regular Azir build probably also going to be a lot better. If you get both of them itemized and you get like perfect items for both of them, like definitely go for this. For example, in the regular Azir build, if you get AD items, you can't really use that on Lux, right? So if you get that situation where you're going for the Azir Lux build and then you only get AD items and like, or like half AD, half AP items, then yeah, probably drop the Lux and go for the Shurima build if you can. But yeah, +1 Shurima, incredibly powerful on this. You could also flex between this and the Kai'Sa Void comps, since their items are very similar, Azir's and Kai'Sa's. But this is just like your really standard vertical Shurima build. Next one up we have is Kayle Reroll. So Kayle Reroll, it's just gonna go like Rage Blades on Kayle's plus like a lot of tanks, and then you go for like a 4-star Poppy. 4-star Poppy is very annoying to deal with, I find. And once you hit like all your 3 stars and reach level 6, you stabilize really, really hard. And then hopefully if you didn't take too much damage in the early game, you could econ up all the way to level 9. And level 9 is really when you're like your team comes like super online. Doesn't always happen. Like I've seen some teams, they hit everything, but they don't have good items on Kayle, such as like no Rage Blades, and then they like bleed out. Not even bleed out, they just like get completely crushed. They don't even bleed out. So you really need Rage Blade whenever you play this, and you need a lot of the copies of the unit. So there are a lot of conditions to this comps. You could go for like maybe 2 econ augments for this build, because reaching level 9 with 1-cost reroll is very difficult to do. So normally with reroll comps, I say only take like 1 econ augment. But with Kayle Reroll, you could probably take 2 of them, because it's just that important to like reach the certain breakpoints. And like, yeah, you want a combat augment whenever you play like TFT, but the combat augment is reaching level 9 and Kayle popping off. So this is like one of the exceptions where like taking a lot of econ augments probably is a good idea. But yeah, super strong if you get it online, but like pretty weird to say the least. For the B tier, like some of these are still playable if you get great starts with them. But we're not going to go over these too much. Ekko Reroll, still okay. Karma Reroll got nerfed so much, but like, yeah, they hotfixed this, and like Taric got killed. So yeah, don't really play this one that much. Riftwalker Kassadin, it's all right. I wouldn't really, yeah, you have to have a lot of Kassadins early game and like perfect item Kassadin for this to really work. Zed Reroll, still very good, but you kind of want like a perfect Zed opener. Rogue Reroll, don't play Rogue, just do the Zed version instead. And then Garen Reroll, I think they buffed Garen a little bit. Maybe it's good. I'm gonna leave it in the B tier for now. There's probably better things to kind of go for. Like, I guess it's uncontested. No one even plays Garen as like a trait unit in a lot of the like meta builds. So maybe you get Garen for free if people are going for like all the other 3-cost rerolls. So yeah, maybe you could pull this off if you get a free 3-star Garen, but there are probably better things to do. Demacia, vertical Demacia, maybe it could be still done, but I haven't really seen it that much, but you can feel free to try it. And yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for the meta snapshot for all the comps. But yeah, just to summarize, like Akshan, going to be your bread and butter. Ravenous Warwick, OP, augment choice, but you don't get it that often. Sorcerers, bread and butter AP comp. Yeah, you could probably just decide on stage 2-1, do you have AP items or do you have AD items? And then force either Sorcerers or Akshan. Obviously, with AD, you could flex into Gunners, Jinx, Tristana Reroll even, or what's the last one? Deadeye. And with AP, you could do like Sorcerers, you could do Kalista Reroll, you could do like the Challenger or any of the Kai'Sa builds or like the Azir Yasuo builds. So a couple things you could kind of flex into. But I think the AD flex is probably like a little more manageable to play, because Sorcerers, like they've used like a lot of weird items compared to the Kai'Sa stuff. But that's kind of how I would approach the patch for now. Legends like Poro or Ornn, you can't really go wrong with it. Maybe someone figures out some weird strategy with one of the other legends that really pops up, but I'll let you know and update you on that next week if that does happen. But yeah, let me know what you think of this patch. We do update this every single Friday, so hopefully I see you guys next week. Or you could catch me on my live stream, because I talk more about all these comps during my live streams on twitch.tv/BunnyMuffins LOL. I am having like slight internet issues right now, so I have been trying to stream, but sometimes they get cut short because my internet starts disconnecting or whatever. But hopefully that gets resolved soon. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.